The Philly shell is the prettiest defense in boxing.
Really looks like, he's a very good round.
Much of the credit for its creation goes to the great George Benton. The man known as the Mayor of North Philadelphia was also one of the slickest fighters of all time. Benton was making a run at the middleweight title when he was drafted into the Korean War. But Benton was more valuable teaching a shell than loading one. He was made Army boxing coach, and soon Americans from around the country were learning George's tricks and winning tournaments around the world. George trained a great many champions over the years, though the most famous disciples of the Philly shell would come from Michigan. The Mayweathers are some of the most famous and infamous folks in boxing. While Floyd Jr. needs no introduction, Uncle Roger was the first champion of the family and the man who passed his knowledge to his nephew. While Roger wasn't the athletic freak Floyd was, he had something his nephew didn't. Power. Nicknamed the Black Mamba, Uncle Roger retired with 59 wins on 35 knockouts, won titles in multiple weight classes. While he didn't have Floyd's perfect record, Uncle Roger was fearless. I know this because he fought Julio Cesar Chavez twice. On paper, Chavez is without a doubt the greatest Mexican fighter to ever live. El Gran Campeon was about putting on textbook pressure all night and being in shape to keep applying. He had a stumpy power to him, and in his heart of hearts, he was a brawler.
He's really getting punished now.
He is the most refined, coordinated, defensively sound brawler to come from south of the border since Salvador Sanchez, which is to say he was hell on wheels in a fistfight. He won his first 88 fights. 2 of them were against Uncle Roger. He opened up Roger's Philly shell like a fisherman shucks an oyster. Today, we look at the nuts and bolts of how Roger's Philly shell works and how Chavez sliced it open. The Philly shell is a defense with a few consistent hallmarks. The stance uses a low lead hand with a high power hand.
He has to gamble. He's got to gamble, David. He's got to get inside, even though he's lining it up.
The low lead allows a Philly shell user to cover and vary their initial strike.
In favor of Mayweather.
Since the lead hand is below the line of an opponent's sight, they probably won't see it in time to defend.
Oh, what a left hook.
By turning it to his own.
The trade-off is that the lead hand is now useless for defending your head, but it covers the lead side of your body just by being there. The Philly shell relies on the lead shoulder to absorb or deflect an opponent's incoming right hands. By turning the lead shoulder inward, you close the open punching lane and ideally push your opponent's punch past you, leaving them off balance and open, because that same motion loads up a right hand. This is the bread and butter of the Philly shell, and why so many Philly shell fighters are such great counterpunchers. Because of the reliance on the lead shoulder, the users of this style fight out of a bladed stance to increase its range of motion and defensive utility. The more bladed the stance you fight from, the smaller a target you present. but the less able to slip away from the side you are facing. Head movement is emphasized to land counters clean. The right hand is held high on defense, designed to catch incoming jabs or to absorb left hooks. And counter short and straight on the back end of exchanges. The right elbow can be leaned down to pick off left hooks to the liver. Chavez understood how it worked. He understood that Roger was a taller man with a longer reach.
A reach like Roger Mayweather's. Mayweather, perhaps the tougher opponent in his career.
Before he could crack the shell, he had to get close.
What's snapping that jab out, Tim? If he's try to get that right hand in. One thing about it,
Chavez is one of the best ring cutters in history. He understood the geometry of the ring, how to step in at angles to take away space. He calculated orbits on the fly like a space shuttle, knew how to slip and get under Roger's longer, straighter punches.
One of the exciting young boxers on the scene.
To catch and parry and roll shots while he closed the gap. While he fought as a swarmer, his defense from the classic high guard was gorgeous. Once in range, Chavez would throw with whichever hand Roger happened to be circling into.
Yes, he is. Mayweather took 2 consecutive right hands on the champion. He's still on the win streak. They ruled it a slip, evidently. There was no count. He's in difficulty. Down he goes again. A short right hand from the champion.
In their first contest, this simple principle, committed to completely by Chavez, is what got him a quick finish. Roger was coming off the ropes, trying to create distance and get back out into open space. Chavez thrashed him around the ring like the Mamba was in with the mongoose.
Pouring it on, he's got him again, a combination. Mayweather, no legs underneath him, and Richard Steele has stopped it. There's the happy champion, Julio Cesar.
Take it as a fella sticking his head into his opponent's face. Well, it's a bit of a...
While a fine display of killer instinct and distance management, it's the second fight where the true genius of Chavez's game plan was fleshed out.
Let's see what we get here.
His ring cutting and distance management is as great as ever.
Straight left, straight right.
His defense is on point on the way in, but his punch selection was Mayweather's biggest problem.
I think it's a little early to tell because Mayweather is kind of an interesting contrast early. Mayweather has thrown by far, but it is Chavez who has been the aggressor, and he's on his fighter.
He spammed his left hook up close, which meant Mayweather's venomous right hand was stuck at home, on defense.
He stood him up and he's got him standing still on the right. I guess one of the issues in this fight, Jim, is whether Mayweather has added weight.
Too busy preventing a nap to hand one out. A wise man once said, "Don't hook with a hooker." With his right, Chavez knew throwing a straight 1-2 would open him up for Roger's favorite counter. So he used a few disguises and workarounds to land upstairs.
And high on Chavez's head. And a right to the Mayweather's chest a little bit. Like that.
When Chavez wanted to land a right, he would either feint to mess with Mayweather's timing on the shoulder roll, or step in at an angle to get around the shoulder altogether.
Round 3 counting down, flush on Chavez's chin, but Chavez does not back up. Right hand from Chavez, Mayweather clowning just a little bit.
He sent straights down to the body and hooked by going around the elbow to land on the exposed kidney.
So there's little stalking, relentlessly.
Behind the low lead hand and bladed stance.
Going to the body. Again, Ellis Burrow says. Mayweather flirting with another point deduction. Both fighters landing good punches. Mayweather landed a right hand. And
Another beautiful feature of Chavez's offense was his double-ups. He'd throw a shot to the body, then go upstairs to the same side.
Chavez stepping in now. Back to work behind the jab. Chavez blocking most of them.
By changing his levels of attack, his accuracy increases.
Lee's going to hurt him seriously with the right in the early part of the forthrightly. Now Chavez lands a left and a right.
The more miles Mayweather moves, the more that bodywork starts to weigh on him. The more Chavez cuts off the ring and gets to impose his A game. Which is his grappling game. Julio is unquestionably one of the best grapplers in boxing.
Regarded as one of the very best in the sport at it. Mayweather is...
He was strong and relentless.
The rest of this fight will be determined on guts.
He worked his hands free and threw as much as possible between and around gloves. Turned the famed Philly shell into the Philly coffin. Chavez is landing nearly half his punches, and Roger can't let his hands go. By the mid-rounds, Uncle Roger is starting to lump up and break down. The fight and crowd turn ugly. Roger's trainer had to tackle Chavez off him.
Deputy Reed carried Chavez halfway across the ring.
That by round 9, Roger looked like the snake on the Mexican flag. Stuck in a fight for his life, he was always destined to lose. The left hook was hammering the final nail in to seal Roger inside his Philly coffin. The fight was stopped between rounds, and Chavez celebrated by hitting himself in the groin while on his trainer's shoulders, as you do. We talked a lot about technique and strategy, how the Philly shell works, and how Julio took it apart. But the raw physicality, the intangibles that separate a good fighter from a great one, can't be expressed to those who haven't felt it. So we can talk technique all night, but the simple fact is, the best way to get through or around any defense is to be Julio Cesar Chavez.